It's loud.
It's just loud.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Call to order. Call to order for the Marin Wildfire Executive Committee regular meeting of November 7th, 2024. Roll call, please.
Director Goins,
Here.
Director McMillan,
Here.
Director Hilliard,
Here.
Director Kurtz,
Here.
and I believe Director Rodoni will be just a few minutes
Yeah,
late.
he's running late. Okay. Any adjustments to today's agenda? Seeing none. Okay. Time for public expression. The public is welcome to address the executive committee at this time on matters not on the agenda that are within the jurisdiction of the committee. Please be advised that pursuant to Government Code Section 54954.2, the committee is not permitted to discuss or take action on any matter not on the agenda. Comments may be no longer than 3 minutes and should be respectful to the community. Please silence your cell phones during the meeting. Mute your microphone when not reporting out. Do we have any public expression?
And I see no hands for public expression at this time.
All right, thank you. And on to the executive officer's report.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome back from a month off from exec and board meetings. Marin Wildfire staff has continued to be quite busy. Fortunately for our off period, fire season kind of slowed down for a little bit. We were dealing with the line fire, the bridge fire and stuff like that during our last meeting, but then we did slow down. But now as you guys are watching the news, you probably know that there's a 14,000 plus acre fire that started yesterday in Ventura, just on the other side of Highway 126 of the Thomas Fire. So it's kind of same direction. And one thing that I found remarkable when I looked at the maps this morning is there's a spot fire on the left flank that is like remarkable as far as how far ahead of this fire it was. So typical Southern California fall fire, strong winds, and as we've been talking about, our dry seasons have been protracted and our wet seasons are shorter. So that's really playing into the fire down in SoCal. I looked at the fuel moistures for us today. Our 100-hour fuel moistures are trending right around average, but with the predicted weather coming up, it's going to dip down close to historic lows. And then our 1,000-hour fuel moistures are just a little bit above average right now. And then as a reminder, I guess it's tomorrow is the anniversary of the Camp Fire. So similar weather conditions now as we had leading up to the Camp Fire. So by no means are we out of fire season at this time. And I haven't seen any predictions of when what we would call a season ending event is coming. So sorry for not the great news. Then and we'll update this more when we have our board meeting in 2 weeks, but we have had 4 meetings. We're entering into our 5th meeting with members of our advisory technical committee and our member agency staff, the people who are actively building our policy or our projects. And that is, how are we using science and data to drive our decision making? So the process has been going very well. There has been a lot of conversation and a lot of thoughts. And what we're really going to do is suggest to each of our member agencies that they pick 1 or 2 of these tools within their zone and see how they can really use those tools to guide their decision-making within the projects within their zones. And then that'll help us inform how we can use these tools across all of the JPA together. If you look at our website, you may not notice that we had a significant update to our website, but we have had a significant update to our website. When we first launched it, it was fully ADA compliant, but as ADA compliance rules have changed and as we have added or changed certain aspects of our websites, we kind of slipped away from full compliance. So we dug back into the website. We are fully ADA compliant with all of the newest standards. And then we actually went above and beyond. And if you can see on the picture of our homepage, there's an accessibility button. And so people can click on that accessibility and change the way they view our website to meet their individual needs. We've had a really nice opportunity present itself to us. UC Merced is working on Spanish translation, or better the better way to describe it is interpretation of wildfire nomenclature. We're having a hard time, not only in this county, but throughout the state, of having standardized Spanish nomenclature for wildfire. So UC Merced is taking it upon themselves, working with CAL FIRE and other statewide entities, also local entities, to create a standardized nomenclature. And they're not doing it in a vacuum, fortunately. And they've been reaching out to a lot of different partners, and they reached out to us. And they're offering the Spanish translation / interpretation for free for us for all of our materials, while working with all the other entities as they can throughout the state to make sure it's standardized language. And so we had a meeting between ourselves, Marin Wildfire, UC Merced, Fire Safe Marin, and Marin County Fire's public information officer, who is a native Spanish speaker, and she's well engaged with CAL FIRE on this topic. So we feel like we're really heading in a good direction. And finally, we did launch our video, Could It Happen Here? And unlike some of our other videos where they really are, can be appropriate for other areas to watch, this one is really focused on Marin County. And it's talking about the fire history in Marin, how it can repeat itself. And then the second half of the video really focuses on what Marin Wildfire is doing should another fire pop up. And with that, I'll stop my screen share and take any questions.
I'm still getting a back echo over here.
So am I.
Is,
We checked this TV.
I just want to make sure it's not affecting the recording or anything. Okay,
They don't hear it on.
okay. Any questions on this item? Or the comment or the points that were included? Any?
We're now in a red alert, right?
The red flag was expiring this morning.
Oh, okay.
Thank you for bringing it up. That's a perfect example how we are not out of the out of danger. One thing I noticed about this red flag compared to the last red flag was the last one we were getting single digit relative humidities. This one we never got down into the single digit, which is great news, but it's still not good news that we had a red flag warning
Thank you.
in November.
Any other comments?
I just wanted to say that I think that Fire Safe Marin has done a really good job educating the public about what red flag warnings mean. So I think the public is, really sensitive to that, which is great.
And the term red flag warning is one of those Spanish translation interpretation things that we are struggling with to have a standardized nomenclature, because it doesn't mean the same thing. It doesn't translate directly,
Same with go bag.
right?
Yeah, it doesn't translate right. Mhm.
Thanks for great report. I just want the board to hear that, understand that about 21 years ago, Nevada lost a fireman in Southern California this week, Steve Rucker, and the conditions were, the burn down in Ventura, those conditions that burned. This was in San Diego area, but I think it's just important for all the great work that we're doing to really understand the bravery and how difficult and dangerous it is that the work that's being done, how important the work is that we're doing. But having been a fireman myself and been burned over, anyway, Steve Rucker lost his life to an explosive fire, defending a home in Southern California, and several of his crewmen were traumatized. And Mark, I don't know if you were on that fire or not, but I just think it's important for us to take a moment and realize, we're doing great work, but when you see our firemen, look them in the eye and say, thank you for what you do.
So I was assigned to that fire. I was an engine captain on a strike team, and we were in the neighboring division to where Steve was. Steve's captain was one of my closest friends, Doug McDonald. He and I actually had spoke with each other before we went out on the fire line that day. And I think the most important part of the story I'll share, besides obviously the passing of Steve, is how history repeats itself. My strike team's assignment was to defend the Inaha Monument where a previous fatality had occurred under the exact same weather conditions.
Good segue back into it. It could happen here. Mhm.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Are there any comments on this from the public? This item.
And I see no hands for comment at this time.
Thank you. Anything else from the committee? Okay, we have the consent calendar. The opportunity for public comment on the consent calendar items will occur prior to the committee's discussion of the consent calendar. The committee may approve the entire consent calendar with one action, and the alternative items on the consent calendar may be removed by any committee or staff member for separate discussion and a vote. Is there any public comment on the consent calendar?
And there are no hands for comment at this time.
Thank you. All right, so we have one item, which are the minutes from September 5th.
I'll move to approve the consent calendar.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All righty. Okay, on to discussion. We have the oversight, which is our main item for today, the Citizens Oversight Committee report. And Mark, you're going to present this item.
I am, and I'm going to start with my typical thank you to the Citizens Oversight Committee. I will call it Citizens Oversight Committee today because that was their name as they wrote this report. But as we know, the name change is now the Community Oversight Committee. So to make it easy, I'll just say COC.
Good.
And I'm not just saying thank you to the COC because that's the appropriate thing to say. I'm saying thank you to the COC because I legitimately and wholeheartedly feel that they have made us a better organization. They have asked probing questions. They have made suggestions in regards to our financial practices and how we provide oversight over our member agencies. And each year, because of their review, I feel that we have tightened up our practices. And so, again, a heartfelt thank you. All 9 of these people volunteer their time. I think a couple of years ago, I actually took the time to add up how many hours they are putting towards this. And my calculator is maxing out, so I'm just not going to do the math anymore. So again, a heartfelt thank you for these people who are very passionate about wildfire safety, but also prudent use of taxpayer dollars. So jumping right in, and I will mention that as you can probably tell, we're receiving this report earlier and earlier each year. They are down. They do have their path set and they're moving forward. And we're actually actively engaged right now with our 23-24 report. And it may be only, if everything goes well, it may only be a couple of months before you guys review the 23-24 report. So recommendation number 1, and this is specific to our core accounting spreadsheet, what we call our project tracker. And what they noticed was that there's some items that are on the project tracker that are not in the work plan portal. And that is because some of our projects were intended, and I'll use the evacuation ingress egress risk assessment as an example. That project was created on our first year, and it was intended to be a multi-year project. It just doesn't always show up in the work plan. So in response to this recommendation, what we do is on that project tracking spreadsheet, we can put an asterisk or something in there to show this isn't in the work plan. It's a continuation of a project from a previous work plan. Recommendation number 2 has to do with completion of projects. And some of the projects, again, may never be completed. The Greater Nevada Shaded Fuel Break, the Greater Ross Valley Shaded Fuel Breaks are examples, but there have been some projects that we do say are completed. And perhaps it was an errant data entry or whatnot. But the recommendation is that Marin Wildfire staff go in behind member agency staff to verify that the project is complete. And for larger projects, I can agree with that. But for some of our smaller projects, I don't think that level of oversight is quite necessary for our member agencies. We have very talented member agencies, and we need to function from a high level of trust. And that is our preference, is to work from there. But obviously, whether it's through site visits or working side by side with their vegetation management personnel at their member agencies, we do see almost every one of their projects. Let's see, recommendation number 3 is COC recommends the explanation column of the staff spreadsheet be used to provide an explanation as to why projects are over budget by 10% or more. We don't fully concur with this. It is important for Marin Wildfire staff and member agency staff to understand what the overages are. Some of it could be related to environmental compliance. Some of it could be, while we underestimated the cost of that project. But to set an arbitrary threshold, we don't agree with that. We agree with more case by case digging into that. And Rachel and I had a quick chance, I'll bring this up now, Rachel, but Rachel and I had a quick opportunity to discuss perhaps refining these responses for when we bring it to the board and bring it similar in alignment with a grand jury report where the member agency receives a grand jury report. They say they either agree, partially agree, or disagree. And so this would be one of the partially agree type items. And so that would be a real easy change if so directed by the exec committee for staff to be able to make those changes as we bring this to the board in 2 weeks. Recommendation 4 is very similar to recommendation 3. So the recommendation is our response is the same. Recommendation 5, the COC recommends projects such as a demonstration garden should be tracked and evaluated to capture lessons and show effectiveness, including measurements of results to assess value prior to approval of similar projects. The COC notes several additional demonstration projects in the upcoming work plans. And sometimes duplication of projects aren't great, but sometimes duplication of projects are necessary, especially when it comes to demonstration gardens, because we want our residents to be able to see A, multiple examples, and B, examples closer to their community. But as far as tracking results, that's part of our strategic plan, our goals 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So we are able to track. And then as far as sharing lessons learned, that's a great point. We need, if Nevada Fire had a challenge or had a success in creating their demonstration garden that may or may not be captured in our measures of success, well, then that's a great story for them to tell. And we do feel that the advisory technical committee and our working groups is a awesome place for that to happen. So it's a partial agreement where we think it actually is functioning well right now. Recommendation number 6, the COC believes that each member agency should immediately provide an updated 2-year attestation that includes the amount of any restricted cumulative unspent funds as of June 30th, 23 and June 30th, 24. The attestation should be signed by the executive officer of the head of the governing body for each member agency and be reconciled to the MWPA records. And this is an example of the COC making us better. Our accounting of unspent funds were not 100% in the end of this fiscal year that we're reviewing. And so based on the feedback we received during this process, we've already made that change and we are already in alignment with recommendation 6 as we close out fiscal year 2024. Recommendation 7, COC recommends that the MWPA withhold the distribution of future local funds 20% to any member agency that is not in timely compliance with the required updated attestation and uniform clear financial and project reports on the member agency's expenditures. And we already have that in place where, and I have a snippet in a staff report that shows where it is. Quite frankly, some of our member agencies were really slow last year in providing our financial records. In fact, we did withhold from numerous agencies the first payment. And so it really did slow down the COC in their work. And it's kind of embarrassing on Marin Wildfire's part to say, come on, COC, we want to report when we aren't providing timely information. So as it was put to me during one of our meetings, maybe I need to be less nice towards our member agencies when it comes to receiving our financials. I can tell you that we are not going to need to withhold any funds this year. We are on the final stretch of receiving all the documentation from our member agencies at this time. Recommendation number 8, and I'm going to paraphrase this since it's a very long paragraph, but essentially is some agencies are doing a really good job of spending all of their local dollars and DSpace dollars. Some agencies have not spent as much. And so they're recommending that the board evaluate we already are evaluating as the board, the work plan that includes the local and D-space projects, but there's less review on the back end to see how they are closing out the local and the D-space. We dig deep into the core as during our finance committee and during the board meeting, but we don't do as in-depth of an analysis of the local and D-space. And so if directed by the board, we can include that in our closeout for future years, that we do a little bit of a deeper dive in local and D-space. And I'll pause here.
I just have a comment, and that is that at Southern Marin, I get a monthly printout of where we are on our Measure C and Measure U funding. And I see what's not spent and go to, as a more member of this board, I go to our prevention staff and say, what's up? And that usually has to do with delay in getting contractors to come out and do the work, or something with the environmental part of it. It's not an intentional unspent. There's always a really good reason for it. But I also think as board members, we also can check in with our own agencies, don't you think?
Correct. And I'll wait for Julie. I see she has.
I'm not sure that every board member is going to do that, Catherine. You have a high standard. Does staff have capacity to do that kind of back end work?
What we could do is, once we receive, because how we close out the books is that, of course, we have our core spreadsheet that tracks every single project that's in the core. And then we send a spreadsheet to each of our member agencies that tracks their local and their D-space projects. And as part of our package that we bring to the finance committee when we close out the core, it would be relatively simple for us to include those spreadsheets. It would just add time to that meeting, which is not a terrible thing.
Okay, then I would support doing that. I think that's a good recommendation, and for more transparency, I think that's good.
Any other initial questions on this item?
Recommendation number 9 has to do with, are we really following the one of the driving principles of Measure C? And that is, are we increasing our efforts and not supplanting efforts that agencies had already done? And I'll use Mill Valley as an example. They had a standing line item for vegetation management. We need to know what that benchmark was at the end of 2019, so that as we move forward, that we can always verify that we are moving forward. So 2 fiscal years ago, we did request information from each member agency, what they were doing from 2019. We still have about 3 or 4 member agencies that we need to receive that information. So we completely agree with this recommendation, and we're in process of getting that benchmark. Recommendation 10 is one that we've talked about quite a bit in previous meetings, and there's been a lot of questions about it, just because I think a lot of this work is not easily visible. And that is, the police rangers in all likelihood perform other police tasks beyond ignition reduction. The COC believes the JBA expenditures should be used for ignition reduction only. We suggest that a formal report be given to the report describing all ranger activities and how the expenditures are allocated between JPA and other activities. So one of the things that I do as executive officer is any agency that has personnel costs related to a project, I ask for an accounting of how much of that person's or that position's time is spent on wildfire mitigation activities, and are there any cost shares? Some of the reporting at the beginning phases was we weren't getting clear reporting on the use of the rangers. However, I was able to have a meeting with San Rafael PD, which had the ranger program during this report. Novato PD now has one that wasn't during this report, but sat down and talked to them and found out what fantastic programs these are, actually. And if you look at our campaign materials of Measure C, this type of work was a promise made to the taxpayers during the campaign. And when I sat down and got the data from both San Rafael PD and Novato PD, what they're doing is fantastic. And we think it makes a difference in when it comes to ignitions from those experiencing homelessness. And they are excited to be able to come to you. It's going to either be in January or February, and they will give you guys a full report exactly in alignment with this recommendation from the COC of their activities. We've even had Contra Costa County has reached out to us based on our program, both in Novato and San Rafael, because they want to learn from us and expand. Also bringing Novato and San Rafael PDs together. They're learning from each other. Hey, you know what? I really like your idea, how you're tracking your data. Hey, I like these tactics that you're having over here. So I think you guys are going to really appreciate this. And then another collateral result, I feel that this, and watching a few fires that may or may not have been arson fires this year, the connection between law enforcement and fire has improved because of this connection. There have been times where us as firefighters felt that we had evidence towards arson, but sometimes we were not always successful in getting the law enforcement agency having jurisdiction or the district attorney to feel the same. I'm seeing that bridge being, that gap being bridged through this relationship. So all in all, I think it's a positive. I'm really looking forward, if you can't tell, to the presentation that you guys will receive in January, February. And I think recommendation 11 really relates to at the time that we were working through this, the lack of data that we had for San Rafael PD's law enforcement officers, which that has been rectified. I do now have that data, but at the time that this was written, we did not have that data. But that is the general lack of evidence in Marin Wildfire files to validate consistently that personnel costs are allocated only to wildfire prevention. Although only 5 member agencies were reviewed for the local bucket, instead of reviewing all 17, they picked 5 agencies and picked those 5 agencies to do an in-depth analysis. So they felt that one of those, that there wasn't enough evidence within those 5 and thought it could translate to the remaining 12. However, like I mentioned, each agency that has staffing, I send them a letter. These are the positions that you list in the work plan. 100, tell me what percentage of work effort is towards wildfire mitigation if there's any cost shares. So I disagree with this recommendation and can show that we have the accounting that these personnel are there. The only way that we can increase this is if we had Marin Wildfire staff showing up at member agencies and seeing if that staff member is working on. Number 12, let's see. This is pretty much this, the same as if we don't receive the data, then withhold future funding. So see recommendations or the responses 7 and 11. Recommendation number 13, and that is the COC recommends the accounting better clarify the income and expenses allocated to the D-Space Alliance as separate from MCFD income and expenses in order to facilitate an easier and more transparent review. This is a complicated matter, and I can see how it was difficult to track. We had about 6 or 7 different spreadsheets that were tracking all of this information. I can totally see this. When I dig deep, I can see that all the accounting is up to par, but it's complicated. So we are working with Marin County Fire, who invoices each of the member agencies of the D-Space Alliance to create a easier to read formula or spreadsheet that shows the accounting back and forth. So I think we'll accomplish that for the 23 or the 24 or 23-24. I've been living in 3 fiscal years lately, so excuse me if I say the wrong year. And that wraps us up. And I'll take any questions and listen for any recommendations from you guys before we bring this to the full board in 2 weeks.
Questions from the committee or thoughts or things that we'd want to bring forward to the full board related to this item? Bruce?
No, my question mark, could you just outline next steps beside bring it to the board? How you envision interaction with the COC and just tell us how this is going to roll out and interactions. And
Next
response.
steps, if you are on board with the recommendations here, quite frankly, we're already there. And if you have any additional, if you don't concur with staff's response, then we would have to make some adjustments. But where we concurred with the COC, we've already made those changes within our systems. And I think that'll be reflected when you see the 23-24 report.
So the next report will reflect the COC's affirmation of our responses. Is
Either
what you're
that or
saying?
you won't see that as a finding.
I just want to say, this is tons of work that they've done, and I'm really grateful that they're so deeply involved in digging through all the weeds. It's really to be so appreciated. So thank you.
And is there a way that we can give them a thank you for this work so
Yeah,
far?
you bet.
How do we do that with a,
Why don't we take that and think about some ideas?
Yeah.
how we can-
okay, thank you.
I'd like to also thank the COC members for the work they've done. I was trying to go through the recommendations and think of it because they're looking at it with such sort of not necessarily outside eyes, but a new set of eyes on so much of the work that we're doing. It's helpful to get the feedback. I've also been looking at it from categorization of, are we looking at financial improvements? Are there operational improvements? Or which are a little bit beyond the scope of the COC. And then really the mandate of the COC is, are we spending the money the way we said we're spending the money? And so I'm looking through the recommendations specifically around that level of categorization. And some of them are absolutely, as you've indicated, really very important, but maybe outside of the scope of the COC. But to have the benefit of those eyes, extra eyes and visibility is really nice and gives us the opportunity to consider those items. So huge round of thanks to the group who are doing that. I know you mentioned we're now opening it up for additional members for the
Correct.
Community Oversight Committee. How many members or?
So we have 9 members currently, which been based on the JPA revision, we will go to 10 members, the 10th being a 1-year term for a high school student. So we are doing outreach to high schools now for that 1-year term for the high school students. And then of the 9 positions, they're broken up into 3 categories of when 3 members term out each year. So Central Marin, West Marin, and what was previously called a civic organization, now a community-based organization, are all up for new terms this year.
Great, thank you. All right, we'll open this item to public comment.
And I see no hands for comment at this time.
And we do have 2 of our COC members in the audience at this time.
Thank you. We don't see who you are, but thank you. All right, and I'll bring it back to the committee. Any other further comments on this item? Nope. All right. Thank you very much.
Yep.
And thank you to the COC. All right, we're now going to be moving into closed session. And I need to read through the details.
Agenda review for the Board of
Oh,
Directors.
sorry,
meeting.
I missed that. Sorry. Okay, agenda review for November 21st.
And it's a pretty basic agenda. And the only addition that I can mention to you right now is on the consent calendar, you'll see a project approval for the environmental compliance for an LRAD project, a long-range acoustical device. And you may, depending on the how the Finance Committee reviews this, a proposed change of our grant specialist from extra hire to an FTE based on the level of work that that grants position has been expending. So based on review at the Finance Committee, you may see that addition as well. You'll notice that we have our financial audit in there. So Finance Committee will review the financial audit, and then we'll bring the financial audit to the full board. And we do have our auditor prepared to give a presentation. I think that's it.
Any other questions from the committee on this item? Or things, okay. Seeing none. Any public comment for agenda for next meeting?
There are no hands at this time.
I think we're all good. All right. Now we're moving into closed session. And we'll go ahead and I'll read through. As indicated on the agenda, the executive committee will be adjourning to a closed session for a conference with its general counsel under Government Code Section 54956.9, subsections D2 and E1, based on existing facts and circumstances that might result in litigation against Marin Wildfire. Now take public comment on the closed session item. Are there any?
And there are no hands for comment.
Seeing no comments, we will adjourn to closed session. All right, we have, do you want us to restart us again? We'll go back into open session? Are we recording? Yeah, we're good? Okay. Okay. Thank you for anyone who's still out there. That's pretty. Well, there's not much here going on. Okay, we've adjourned from closed session. We returned to open session and we have no reportable action was taken in closed session. Do we have any items for future agenda items? Seeing none, we are now adjourned and we will see you all at the board meeting on November, no, not November 7th. 21st. November 21st. Thank you all. We are now adjourned.